Okay, so starting over. Last week we talked a little about compound interest. You may or may not have had a chance to go through and look at some of those calculations, but the important thing, kind of the takeaway from that whole discussion, is the importance of starting early. There's a quick video clip for the folks that are in the distance section. They have to comment on some of the videos and things like that. I had a video that related to compound interest that is probably worth watching as well here in this section. And again, some of these things out the internet, obviously, somebody takes the time to put it together, usually commercial type things. And I'm not saying that I'm endorsing any of these companies. There are some decent companies out there. There's a lot of junk. But this one is kind of interesting, and there's a really almost evangelical kind of finance guy who we'll look at in a few minutes. He's got these really distracting hand gestures, and I don't know what his full gig is, what his backstory is, but the points he says about paying yourself first is pretty good stuff. So we'll take a look at that. But this one is interesting, and
James and Tom were friends who grew up together. They both knew that they needed to start thinking about the future. At age 19, James decided to invest $2,000 every year for 8 years. He picked investment funds that average a 12% interest rate. Then, at age 26, James stopped putting money into his investments. So he put a total of $16,000 into his investment funds. Now, Tom didn't start investing until age 27. Just like James, he put $2,000 into his investment funds every year until he turned 65. He got the same 12% interest rate as James, but he invested 23 more years than James did. So Tom invested a total of $78,000 over 39 years. When both James and Tom turned 65, they decided to compare their investment accounts. Who do you think had more? James, with his total of $16,000 invested over 8 years, or Tom, who invested $78,000 over 39 years? Believe it or not, James came out ahead, $700,000 ahead. Tom had a total of $1,532,166, while James had a total of $2,288,996. How did he do it? Starting early is the key. He put in less money, but started 8 years earlier. That's compound interest for you. It turned $16,000 into almost $2.3 million. Since James invested earlier, the interest kicked in sooner. To learn more about how proper financial planning and smart investing can help you reach your financial goals, visit Bespoken Wealth.
Okay, so again, they don't give you all the background data, but you can go through and do the calculation for yourself, and it is true. And what's significant is, basically as society, or the trend is for people to put off saving, and you may think, I can't really put away a significant amount right now, but the deal is, if you are in a situation where you have any excess money, it would pay huge dividends to you, literally. 12% in this example, I say 10%, and I think I'm being pretty aggressive. 12% that's consistently killing it for 50 years. I don't know if you guys are tracking the market right now, but things are not going well. I mean, it goes up and down, but right now there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of, the U.S. market's been kind of overstated. People have not really wanted to address what's going on, but there's also a lot of pressure from China and other stuff like that. But anyway, we're obviously it's a buying opportunity if you're in that situation, but if you're trying to sell stuff, not so good. So any questions on that? Anyway, time value of money, very important, and if you can put away a little bit now and really build habits, though, is more importantly what we're talking about. It's pretty tough to, let's say you start out and you put away 1% of your wealth. You think you're living paycheck to paycheck. I have absolutely no money. Well, I bet most people would probably afford to put away 1%, and then maybe 2%. And believe me, that's the tough part, is that initial savings part. But once you get kind of in a routine where you learn to live within your means, you learn to spend less, than you're taking in, it becomes easier and easier. And seriously, about the 2 to 5 year point, I mean, the greed factor actually starts to kick in where you know, I'm not one of these people that, at least I try not to obsess over money. I mean, if I am, then something's seriously gone wrong. I mean, the point of this thing is not to be, just a total Scrooge and, not able to pry open your wallet. But the thing is to not have your finances drive your choices in life, Well, I could have done this, but I don't have the funds. Or I'm stuck with this crappy job, but I don't have the, resources to change, and I'm stuck here and stuck there. I'm seeing on a different side, too. I don't have a mammoth house myself, but I've got friends who do. And, man, the real estate market here in Alaska is probably going to take some hits. But what is already taking hits, if you're in the high-dollar home category, $800 to $1 million home, those things are not selling. There's nobody to buy them from you. So it may be worth a lot, but guess what? Things are only worth what somebody's willing to pay you for it. And right now, there's that group has kind of gone away. So what we're going to be talking about tonight, though, is money management, financial statements, and budgeting type things. So, I've already kind of addressed some of it. We'll look at some of these objectives, but we're not, completely tied to them. For me, I would be whatever. I'd be lying to you if I told you I exactly budget things every day. My strategy is a little different, and I think it's actually more useful, especially given what you're up against in terms of fraud and everything else that's out there. And I tend to review my expenses. I tend to put pretty much everything on credit cards. I mean, with the exception of going to a bar or something like that. But everything, fuel, groceries. Me and my daughter went to Vancouver and Whistler over Thanksgiving, and literally I did not buy $1 Canadian. I mean, everything from a Slurpee, because they got 7-Elevens there, and some weird stuff like that. Everything went on credit cards. And, yeah, that's dangerous if you don't pay off your credit cards. But if you do, well, one thing that you get, especially for me, I'm getting a bunch of miles because I needed to fly me and my daughters around. But also, I've got that ability to look back at the end of the month and go, wow, what happened? Where did all my money go? Well, if everything is on a credit card, I've got some traceability to it. And what I'm saying in terms of a budget type standpoint, you need to, you should not get a credit card statement if you have them and not be able to go through it every month, because you will find bogus stuff. I think I'm on literally my 4th credit card, Alaska Airlines credit card. I've got a corporate one and a business one and a personal one. And man, there's so much fraud and garbage out there. We'll talk more about that later on. I'll show you some videos and stuff, but people are there's so many different ways to get ripped off, and it's not all online. A lot of times it's, in the store. But anyway, you need to review those statements. And the thing is that, as opposed to debit cards, and I like debit cards, and debit cards just basically comes right out of your checking account. So if you're one of those people who tends to go into debt, a debit card may prevent you from doing that. But there isn't legal protection on debit cards. The bank will generally take care of bogus charges, but they're not obligated to by law. With credit cards, they are. But there's caveats in there that you have to report it within a certain length of time. So if you find a statement and, I got ripped off 6 months ago, that's tough luck. But if it's within a month, within the billing cycle, they absolutely have to take care of it. And they're acting like they're, helping you out and all this other stuff. It's a legal requirement. And they'll also say, we're protecting your credit. It works for everybody, but really what they're doing is they're protecting their liability, because they're the one who's on the hook for fraud. That's why, if you have one of the cards with a chip in it, that's why they got to use those readers. If they don't use those readers, if they don't make you slide in the card and there's fraud, the merchant's responsible. The credit card company won't reimburse them for that. So typically, the merchant, if they go through all the procedures, it's a little different in Europe. Europe, they have chip and PIN, where even with a credit card, you shove it in there and then you got to do a 4-digit PIN. But credit cards, I think they're coming around. But I know Germany and Spain, they were, I was kind of the same way, using credit cards a fair amount, but they were kind of down on it, like it was a macho thing, and especially in Spain, where you don't have the money to pay for this, so you have to put it on a credit card. No, I just prefer, and plus I don't like all the. I got enough check in my pockets already. I just don't like all the change. So, anyway, money management, day-to-day financial activities to manage your economic resources, looking towards long-term financial security. So, anyway, the only way you're going to achieve long-term financial stability is by putting something away. And again, that's why we talk about time value of money. It doesn't have to be much, but it does two things. It builds habits, and believe me, that small amount of money you think is insignificant will grow given enough time. And that's the beauty of being young, like you all are. You have that time on your side to let it grow. So anyway, opportunity cost, money management. Yep. So everything you spend, is something that you can't save. So again, I'm not saying to be a miser, but don't waste money. If it doesn't necessarily contribute to your if it's not that enriching, then skip it. Again, I'm not going to argue with coffee and cigarettes and things like that, but if you do the math at the end of the month, that's a tremendous amount of money. So maybe not those, but maybe going out to eat, or just not planning ahead or whatever. I mean, I'm just like everybody else. You end up starving, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to go and do something stupid. But anyway, there's ways around it. Like I said, skiing in Alaska for $25. That's, my life is not diminished. The fact that I planned ahead, and I don't know what it is, 60, 70. What's a daily pass? Yeah, Whistler, man. That's why I went to Canada. I mean, Canada's great, but number one, it was Thanksgiving, which not their Thanksgiving, so the tickets were cheap, and their exchange rate is $1.40. So you go there, it's $100 and something for probably about $100 for a lift ticket there, and $60. And like places like Lululemon, my daughter, whatever, Christmas time coming, she's in there buying stuff, but it was priced the same in U.S. and Canadian dollars. So, I mean, that's like 40% discount. Anyway, there's things like that if you're kind of attuned to it. I mean, I'm not saying to be stupid. We also did the Airbnb, and fantastic place. It can be a little sketchy at times, but I haven't had any bad luck yet. If you guys haven't tried that, Uber, where it's available, there's so many things you can do now that are in Boston, man. I got in a bad sketchy neighborhood. I was on a university trip, and I'm like, I got to get out of here. And I was at this Irish pub. And I'll try Uber, So I loaded up the app. I didn't even get close to finishing my beer, and there's this car, and he's got, I was like, oh, well, that's the car he's got. And some dude in a little Hyundai, he got employed like 2 days ago. He got hired by Uber. Uber leased him a car. He was, I can't remember which country it was some small African country, but he's perfect English, had a GPS, took me to a different bar in a better neighborhood. And I think I was out $5 or something. And it goes PayPal. They're completely cashless. So, I mean, there are some screaming deals, but it's not, anyway, you got to kind of work it. And it's that fun, kind of, sort of, Yeah. My worst story was I was in Saudi Arabia one time, and I was getting engaged, and I was bargaining on the ring, and that was maybe inappropriate. It was probably a bogus stone anyway, so don't take it to that level. That was inappropriate. And this Saudi guy, he knew exactly what was going on. He's like, looking at me and looking at her. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe this is over the top. But it was only a trading ring anyway, because I knew it was probably a bogus stone. We'll talk about precious metals and stones and things like that, and believe me, the Middle East is not the place to get those. They're usually not authentic, so not a good deal. All right, so we're talking about opportunity cost there for a while. But anyway, yeah, if you enjoy shopping, I mean, I was in a fighter squad. We had a guy, his call sign was Slaw, shops like a woman. I mean, that's a pejorative term. I don't mean to be sexist, but like, dude, that's what he did. That was like his hobby. He shot. It was just weird. I don't mean, I don't know women are like that, but that was his call sign, and he knew the price of everything, everywhere. You don't want to be like that. So, money management, storing and maintaining records. So the important ones, and this has gotten far easier. Most things now are on a PDF, and most like banks and things like that will keep the records. You simply need to download them, and usually at tax time, you download them. You save copies somewhere, preferably like in a fireproof safe, and you're good to go. Personal financial statements. You can do this now and again, to keep track of things, and also it's also kind of good for like life insurance purposes and stuff, so that you have a record. So nobody's planning to die, but if something like that were to happen, somebody can, your significant other can figure out what is going on, and sometimes banks will require it as well. Creating and implementing a plan. So this budgeting part, again, I try not to run it that close. Again, I've had people who absolutely budget out every cent, and I just think that's, I'd rather concentrate on the income side than if I'm going to spend that kind of time rather than the outgoing side. So I'd rather take on a second job or something else. Which I saw that. So items in your home file. So employment records, things like that. Most of that stuff would be online. You kind of use your own sense on this. Money management records, obviously bank accounts, things like that. Tax records, certainly. Again, I'm not going to advocate that you use TurboTax, but it's probably a pretty good one. There's other systems out there. There's TaxGup. There's other companies. But I tell you what, for me, once you pick one, if you stay with it, it's not bad because everything's already populated. Like when I go to do taxes next year, names, social security numbers, employers, all that stuff is already filled in. So, and they also have all my old tax returns. IRS wants to see that stuff like, depending on who you talk to, but typically 7 years back. Yes?
I usually just use a lot of stuff on my computer and that kind of drive. Do you think it's smarter to have a paper form too?
No, I'm not advocating paper form. Yeah, no, I as long as I've got it. I mean, I've had hard drives go, wonky, and certainly CDs and DVDs, those things can get, but probably backed up electronically in a couple places, and you'd be happy. You can get that stuff back, but to go to the IRL, there's a fire and everything's gone. They're going to want to see something. That excuse has been done before, but if you make a credible effort, but yeah. I would almost, a paper copy is number one, it's going to get too bulky and everything else. And it's far easier, once it's in PDF, the search functions. Yeah, well, I would never leave it on one, but as long as I had it backed up a couple places. Yeah. But they talk in here about like safe deposit boxes. Anybody have a safe deposit box? Know anybody who's safe? They just don't exist that much anymore. So, for me, and most Alaskans, I think, have some sort of safe, and make sure it's a fireproof one and a waterproof one because they're going to, trash it. And if you have relatives also that, maybe if you're going to have two copies, don't have them both in the same place. But yeah, you should be fine. But so much of the stuff is kept by, the banks or the institutions themselves. Consumer purchase, auto credit records, to a certain extent. I mean, most of that stuff, again, you can get copies from the DMV. Housing records, probably to establish, what the value of the home was when you purchased it. But once you've kept it for a long enough time where you're going to be able to escape the capital gains, then you're not going to need that. Insurance records, certainly, but mainly just the companies and all, and maybe the policy numbers. Investment records. This will all be, most of your taxes when you're doing your taxes will be the investment records, so it's the same thing. Estate planning, retirement records can be important depending on your situation. Anything like a will or something that's like, where the signed copy is obviously got more value than a paper copy. And also, yeah, so if you're looking at electronic versions of wills, that's not going to be as valuable as the one that's signed and notarized. So here they're talking about the safe deposit box. I just don't think they're that accessible for most folks. Birth, marriage, death certificates, copies of wills. They're nice to have. You can get those things though regenerated. I've had to do this before. And State Department's the worst. If you have a child born overseas, they charge like $50. But most counties and stuff, it's $15, $25 to get copies of birth certificates. Military stuff, yeah, they keep a lot of stuff online. Custodies. But some of these things of photos or files of valuables, even like a video of kind of the contents of your home, that's always nice to have, so you can kind of reestablish what you have. Banking numbers, mortgage titles, life insurance, stock and bond certificates. Okay, the fact that they say that, you've already screwed up. If you are physically holding stock or bond certificates, unless it's some antique, something or other, I've bought and sold hundreds literally of stocks, and I've never ever taken the certificates. That's just a liability. Why you don't? That would be abnormal, and you have to pay extra to get those things shipped around and stuff. It's just not something that's done. So don't worry about that. When you buy and hold stocks, they're listed in your investment records, and the investment firm holds all those if they even exist in paper form. Typically, they're just electronic. Coins and other collectibles could be, but that's why it might be in your gun safe, because your guns are kind of collectibles as well. So, anybody big into collecting coins? It's kind of a, again, I some of those things where it's hard to establish the value. Somebody says a coin's worth something, some fantastic amount of money. It's only worth that if somebody's standing there with a check or cash ready to pay you for it. So I just don't think it's a liquid and probably not that great of an investment, unless you're very, very knowledgeable in the subject. Records on your personal computer, account centers, deferred. You could have that on there, but we've all lost computers and had hard drives go. So debit card records, certainly. Those just go in with finance records. So birth certificates, wills. Wills kind of expire. Your life situation changes. So you need to get those updated every 3 to 4 years anyway. Social Security information, do what you want with it, but if you need to get a new one, you just go to that office and you pay them about $10 and you get a new card. So birth certificates, they can be regenerated, but it's helpful to have them on hand. But again, if I've, I don't want a huge file here. I want to just have the important stuff. I certainly want my passport. I own some foreign property, and the way they do property in Europe, if you don't have the original deeds, it's really a problem. Over here, that's held by a title escrow company. You don't keep that stuff. It's recorded in an office. It's kept at the courthouse. You don't have, those sorts of documents. Copies of tax returns, and so anyway, they're saying 6 years. I'm saying 7. But anyway, those ones, when you go to, if you're using TurboTax or something like that, which, especially if you're not making much money, you can file for free. So why wouldn't you? Anyway, you typically file electronically, but there's also typically a means to hit print and either print to a PDF or print to a hard copy, depending on what you like. But you want to keep that data in case of an audit. And then personal financial statements. If you are starting to save some money and you want to keep track of it, that's good. But again, you have to assess your risk tolerance. People right now, if you're doing like a monthly net worth thing, well, it's going to be kind of stressful because your net worth is diving. All these stocks you bought over the past year are not worth quite what they were. And you're long term anyway, so I would give myself a monthly update. I think you're just looking for problems. You may want to make sure that you're, once a year when you're doing your taxes, make sure your asset allocation is about what you want. You've got a certain amount in stocks, you have a certain amount in bonds if that's part of it, real estate, but just kind of on a macro level. But to sit there and watch the stock market every day and see what your net worth is, you're just looking for stress and apt to make some bad decisions. People who, I'm losing it all, I'm just going to sell. Well, those are the people who get, punished in a market like we've got. So some of these things, though, if you're trying to buy a new home, trying to get a loan, yeah, you might have to put some of these items together. So assets, obviously, what you own. Liquid assets, real estate. Liquid assets are one thing. Real estate, personal possessions, investment assets. So, and again, it's worth, not what you think it is. It's market value. And market value is based upon where we're at. So, again, if real estate takes a dive here in a little while, unless you're moving or have some other situation, if I was somebody right now, and the market started to dive, if at all possible, I'd probably rent that home rather than sell it for a while. So step 2, determine the amounts owed. So these are the liabilities. So current liabilities, things that you own, over a year, long-term liabilities, something like a home or maybe a car if you've got, 4 or 6 year loan on it. And then net worth is easy, assets minus liabilities. And insolvency is inability to pay debts when they're due. So insolvency actually takes into account, cash flow. You could have, you could own $1 million house, but not be able to, buy groceries and stuff. You've got a cash flow problem. On paper, you're worth a whole bunch, but, obviously you're not going to sell your house to buy groceries. So, I would say you're insolvent because you can't pay the debts when you're due. So that's what it's about, is making sure that we can kind of ride things out until the situation improves. So ways to increase net worth. Yep, obviously increase your savings, reduce your spending, increasing the value of your investments, obviously let them build up, and reducing the amount you owe. So, like I say, from the get-go, there's 2 groups of people out there, those who earn interest and those who pay interest. So, if you've got a bunch of debt, especially, consumer debt, credit card stuff that's just eating away and you're just making, minimum monthly payments, your net worth is going to be declining. So what you need to do is kind of stop that, and there's ways to work that out. We'll talk more about credit debt and things like that, but typically, you would probably want to cease using the credit card for a while and possibly put those credit cards on some sort of different structure. So I'm actually doing kind of something like that. I had a fair amount of cash, dumped it in the market because I was going to make a quick killing on some stock. Anyway, didn't quite happen. Now the market's coming to go up. Got some money on the credit card from some inventory I had to buy, and so, no big deal. Now, I'm more aggressive than most of you because I get those stupid credit card offers in the mail all the time. They have 0 interest on the balance transfer, so I may postpone my guilt and roll it on one of those for 0 interest for 6 months or whatever, and hope the market improves. If not, just keep paying them off. But anyway, it's a short-run problem. Reducing the amounts you owe. Cash flow statement. So cash flow is what I was talking about before. This is, the amount of money coming in, the amount of money going out, and that's the cash flow. So most of the time, companies fail because of cash flow. It's, it has that time element. It's not just the broad asset classes. It's the time element that kills people. So how do you do a cash flow statement? Obviously you're going to report all the income, wages, salary, commission, self-employment, savings, tax income, gift grants, anything that's coming in, pension, retirement, alimony, child support, and then the expenses. So fixed and variable. You know, fixed would be things like rent that aren't going to change. Variable would be maybe some entertainment expenses and other items. And then a budget or a spending plan. Live within your income, spending money wisely, those sorts of things. Does anybody use a system called Mint? Yeah? You like it?
I do.
Yeah. It's pretty good. It's come some ways. We'll talk a little bit about it. I'll show you a little demo, but the demo's even getting dated because it's changed quite a bit. It's gotten better. But anyway, those are some things. I used to use Microsoft Money and Quicken and stuff like that, but you have to be fairly methodical to keep it updated and things like that. Mint is a little user-friendly and kind of cloud-based thing where you can access it from the website. So, mint.com. In terms of budgeting, yep, well planned, realistic, flexible. So, the other thing about it too is you usually have people that are either married or for whatever situation, and oftentimes it's a lot of stress because people don't agree on spending. So, if you can get in a situation where you do what we're talking about, pay yourself first, where you say, okay, what we're going to do is, get 10% of the income and put it into some sort of investment plan from the get-go, then any money that's left over, there's, guilt-free money. We've already saved. We may decide to do something else with it, or maybe even some speculative investing, but it's kind of guilt-free money. So, different ways to work with a budget. Mental budget, physical budget, written budget, computerized budget. So they're talking about Quicken there. They're talking about Mint online. Different ways to do it, but whatever works for you. Yeah. And certainly, for me, I definitely find that, buying something and then put it on finance or credit cards, it's just not as much. I don't enjoy it as much. If I can actually pay for it in cash. In certain classes and items, like especially like recreational type things, I try not to finance those just because it's a want more than a need. So, but you'll have different goals that you'll be saving for. And sometimes it's good to associate what your actual goal is to motivate you to do it. And plus, if it's, say, in the case you're saving for education, you're saving for some sort of medical savings type thing, it's there's tax advantages to go ahead and get into that type of account up front, especially if you're saving for education, use a 529 or a PEGMA, Uniform Gift of Minors Act. And when you put the money in there, then there's advantages. So, setting up a savings plan is just dead easy. I mean, you don't have to write a check. If you say you wanted to put away just, a certain percentage of your income, for me, I would go to whatever mutual fund company that I preferred and set up like an auto draft from that company. And I usually do it for the 5th of the month or whatever, where they basically deduct from my account a certain amount. But I like doing it that way rather than with the employer. If you do it with the employer, then if you want to change the amount, you got to go talk to those folks. Now again, if your employer has some sort of matching system, some in-house investment thing, you definitely want to make sure that that's part of your plan. You want to make sure that you get any matching that's available. But if it's just you, then just go with a couple percent. And as long as it's set up as an automatic, recurring withdrawal type thing, there's usually not a minimum associated with it. Most of the mutual fund companies don't have those types of minimums. So, But it's just a good habit to get in, and then you start sort of building a relationship with this company. And not that it's, I don't mean that kind of relationship. I just mean these people have got most of your financial records, and so years from now, you can look back at your account, and you can look at all the items, your investments, and you can determine the basis. The basis would be, let's say I paid $30 a share for the stock, and it's now worth 60 or whatever. Remembering what the original purchase price was, I don't have to do that because it's being tracked by that company. Since I've continued to do business with them, it's all there for me. So, selecting the savings techniques. Payroll deductions into a savings account. Again, I prefer not to do it on the employer's side. I prefer to do it on my side. When it's actually got to my account, I just have my account debited directly by the company, so that's mine too. 401k plans, we'll talk more about this later, but 401k, this could be the same, tied in with number 2. 401k doesn't have to be necessarily through your employer, but you would save in a determined 401k plan, a tax-deferred plan. What's going to happen in a 401k? Let's say you're making $100,000 a year, and let's say you're pretty aggressive. You're putting $20,000 a year into a 401k plan. Well, what that means is when you go to pay your taxes at the end of the year, you legitimately appear to the IRS and only have to pay taxes on $80,000. That other $20,000 went in a 401k plan, a tax-deferred plan, and meaning tax-deferred, that paying of taxes is deferred until you retire. So you can't go grab that money. If you do, there's penalties and stuff. But if you are going to save money for retirement, if you put it in a 401k and don't touch it until you're 59 and a half, then you can start to draw on that 401k, and what you'll pay when you withdraw that money, you'll pay the taxes on it there. Okay, but you should or may be in a lower tax rate at that point. There's also other types. You've got IRAs and Roth IRAs, and one type you pay the taxes up front, but when you hit retirement, all your earnings, all the income is not taxed. So we'll talk way more about this. There's a mirrored plan. It's a 403B if you're an educator, just like a 401k, but for an educator. Anyway, different types of tax-deferred plans. Save coins like in a big jar, I guess. Anyway, I don't do cash. Write a check each payday as a percentage of income. More cumbersome. That requires some input on your part. I just, that whatever. Let's say it's $50 or $100. I just know that's not in my account. And sure enough, in my checking account after the 5th, that $100 is gone. And I'm not, I try and make it dead easy where I'm not having to think about it, and that money is done before I get started. So let me, this whole caution, or not caution, but this comment about pay yourself first. I'll show you this guy. He's pretty animated, but he's got pretty good point. It's just the hand gestures just kind of get to me after a while.
Many years ago, a man named Klassen wrote a book called The Richest Man in Babylon.
Okay.
A man named Klassen wrote a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. This book became a worldwide bestseller, sold millions and millions of copies in every language. And it has one basic principle in the book, which is not very large, which says, pay yourself first. Resolve today that you are going to save and invest at least 10% of your income throughout your working life. Take 10% of your income off the top of your paycheck each time you receive one. Pay yourself first and put it into a special account for financial accumulation. The fact is that if you save just $100 per month throughout your working lifetime and you invest that money in an average mutual fund that grows at 8 to 10% per annum, you will be worth more than $1 million by the time you retire. My good friend David Bach wrote a book which said that If you simply spend one latte less, $5 a day, and you call it the latte factor, and save that money, $25 a week, you'll save $100 a month and you'll become financially independent. He's been on half the television shows in America explaining that by saving a few dollars each day and saving it, you can achieve all your financial goals. What this means is that anyone, even a person earning minimum wage, if he or she starts early enough and saves long enough, can become a millionaire over the course of his or her working lifetime, and that includes you. Developing a lifelong habit of saving and investing your money is not easy. It requires tremendous determination and willpower. You have to set it down as a goal. You have to write it out. You have to make a plan. You have to work on it all the time. But once this practice locks in and becomes automatic, your financial success is virtually guaranteed. The key for you is to practice frugality, frugality, frugality in all things. Be very careful with every penny, especially at the beginning of your working life. Question every expenditure. Delay or defer important buying decisions for at least a week, if not a month. The longer you put off making a buying decision, the better your decision will be and the better price you will get at that time. A major reason that people retire poor is because of impulsive buying. They see something they like and they buy it with very little thought. They become victims of what is called Parkinson's Law, which says that expenses rise to meet income. This means that no matter how much you earn, you tend to spend that much and a little bit more besides. As a result, you never get ahead and you never get out of debt. Your job is to break Parkinson's Law. You don't have to be a victim of Parkinson's Law, but if you cannot save 10% of your income, start today by saving 1% of your income in a special savings and investment account. Put it away at the beginning of each month, even before you begin paying down your debts. Learn to live on the other 99% of your income. As you become comfortable living on 99%, raise your savings goal to 2% and live on 98%, then 3% and 4% and so on. Wow! Within 1 year, you'll be saving 10% and maybe even 15 or 20% of your income and living comfortably off the balance. At the same time, your savings and investment account will start to grow. You'll become more careful about your expenditures, and in a miraculous way, your debts will begin to be paid off one after the other. Within a year of starting saving 1% a month, your entire financial life will be under your control, and you will be on your way to becoming a self-made millionaire. Now, this process has worked for everyone, including tens of millions of people who read and applied the idea from Clausen's Richest Man in Babylon. Try it for yourself. Open a special account for financial accumulation today. Make a deposit in the account, even $5 or $10, no matter how small. This starts to set up a force field of energy that will attract more money. Then look for every opportunity to add to this account. Begin to study money so that you understand how to make it grow. Read books and magazines by experts on the subject of money. Never stop saving and learning and growing until you become financially independent. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please subscribe to my channel by clicking on the button.
Okay, so then he goes on his little spiel there. But the deal is, a couple things. Number one, he talks about being a millionaire. Well, guess what? You kind of need to be a millionaire if you want to not have to work your entire life. Because if you got $1 million and you're making 8 to 10% interest on it, you're generating about $80,000 to $100,000 in income. So, cool, you can stop work, especially if you're later in life and you own your home. You don't have a house payment. You don't have, you're not having to save money anymore. You're not having to pay for kids' college, hopefully. So you could live pretty well on that kind of money. So, but it's just the same. It's not like you're going to be, the deal is that people are living quite a bit longer now, and you don't want to, kind of eat the golden goose. You want to preserve that principle and live off the interest. The other thing is, too, he talks about a special savings account. Well, He doesn't. He's not recommending a special thing, but I think the distinction that he's making is pretty good. That especially if you go with, like, say, a mutual fund company or something probably different than your normal bank, that's probably a good thing, because then if you're just putting it in a checking account that's kind of linked to your savings account, it's pretty darn easy to transfer that money back over whenever you want. I'm not saying you want to make this money inaccessible, but you do want to make it sort of, this is my savings stuff. This is my retirement fund, my college fund, my whatever fund that I'm not going to use for day-to-day expenses, and that's pretty important. The other thing too is with the taxes, and we'll talk more about taxes here, even in the next hour, and we'll spend a lot more time next week on it. Let's say that I'm saying if you're making $100,000 and you can put away that full, there's limits on how much you can put in a 401k. For this example, we'll say $20,000. Okay, so if you're putting away that full $20,000, it's pretty good, pretty invested, pretty aggressive, 20% of your income. But let's say you don't want to do that. I'm going to spend it all. Well, guess what? You don't get that whole $20,000, because that money that was going in that tax deferred account it's going to be taxed. So not all that $20,000 is going to be available to you. If you're in, say, a 28% tax bracket, you're looking at whatever, 17 something that's going to be available. So you're basically wasting that extra couple $1,000 that you're just paying more in taxes. So there's certain goals you should have in terms of personal finance. And one, like I've said, if there's anything to deal with matching, that's a no-brainer. If you're making $100,000 for a company and they give you some sort of 4 or 6%, the company I used to work for used to do 10%. So that's just money you're leaving on the table if you don't do whatever. You put up 4% and they match it with 4. So I'd much prefer to make $104,000 than $100,000. So I would certainly match that before I do anything else. And then don't be paying interest to less, and at least not on consumer debt. Really you only want to be doing that on real estate where it's tax deductible. Credit card interest is not tax deductible, and it's huge. It's high. 14% or whatever, depends on your credit card. So, anyway, let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back and we'll talk more about this, and then we'll move into some tax stuff.